Hello, welcome to Live from the New York Public Library. My name is Surya Chum and I work with the Public Programs team at NYPL. I'm so honored to introduce this evening's event, Pride of the 80s and 90s, which focuses on a truly remarkable generation of artists and activists. This is the generation that saw the AIDS crisis unfold, and amid the tremendous activism it spurred, a part of this generation initiated powerful discussions about what it means to live at the intersections of identity and transformed conceptions of art making. Joining us for tonight's discussion are Andrea Jenkins, who is the first Black transgender woman elected to public office in the US. Andrea currently serves on the Minneapolis City Council. As a poet, she is the author of the poetry collection, The Tea is Not Silent, New and Selected Poems. She also is the contributor to numerous anthologies. Also joining us this evening is Bill T. Jones, a choreographer, dancer, theater director, and writer. He is the artistic director, co-founder, and choreographer of Bill T. Jones' Arnie Zane Company, founded in 1982 with his late partner, Arnie Zane, and has created over 140 works for his company. He is the artistic director of New York Live Arts. Bill is the recipient of multiple major honors, including the National Medal of Arts, Kennedy Center Honors, and the MacArthur Genius. Toshi Reagon is a versatile singer, songwriter, guitarist who has moved audiences since she took the stage at 17. With her big-hearted, hold-nothing-back approach to rock, blues, R&B, country, folk, spirituals, and funk. Among Toshi's genre-defying works is a visionary opera based on Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. Also joining is Pamela Sneed, a poet, professor, and performer, and the author of Sweet Dreams, Kong, and Imagine Being More Afraid of Freedom Than Slavery, and the forthcoming Funeral Diva published by City Lights in October. Pamela has performed at Brooklyn Museum, the Whitney, the Public Theater, and many other noteworthy institutions. And finally, moderating tonight's conversation is Kia LaBeija. Kia is a fine artist who works with the mediums of photography, performance, collage, and film. She's presented work at the Whitney, Brooklyn Museum, the Studio Museum in Harlem, to name just a few places where she's presented. Kia was the reigning overall mother of the iconic House of LaBeija as it entered into its 50th year. This is the second of 3 conversations that we're producing this week dedicated to Pride. Each one highlights a different generation of LGBTQ activists, writers, and artists. NYPL has one of the greatest collections in this country documenting LGBTQ history, ranging from the records of Mattachine Society, the papers of James Baldwin, to the archives of the New York City Trans Oral History Project. Our collections also include the photographs of pioneering photojournalist Diana Davies. 3,000 newly digitized images of Davies' photographs are available now online. I'd also like to give a special shout out to Jason Bauman, Assistant Director of Collection Development and Coordinator of the library's LGBTQ initiative. Jason helped support the planning of this series, Pride Across Generations. So just a couple of housekeeping items to address. This talk is being simulcast on YouTube and Zoom. The event is being recorded. I assure you, you yourselves are not being recorded, only our speakers, Andrea, Bill, Toshi, Pamela, and Kia and me are being recorded. The speakers would be glad to answer some of your questions. You can send your question to them at any time during the conversation. If you do have a question, the procedure is as follows. Type the question in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of the Zoom app. We'll make sure the speakers see them, but they may not have the time to answer all of the questions. At the end of the event, we'll be sharing a short 2-question survey with you, and we'd love your feedback if you have a second. We'll post the link to it towards the end of the event, both in the chat on Zoom and in the comments section on YouTube. We hope you'll join us tomorrow for the last event in our series, Pride 2020 Reframing Liberation, with Ian Field Stewart, Fran Torrado, and Lama Rod Owens. If you'd like to learn more about these events and everything else the library is doing, please visit nypl.org/connect, where you can sign up for a newsletter and access the myriad of resources we are making available at this time. With that, I am pleased finally to welcome our wonderful speakers, Kia, Andrea, Bill, Toshi, and Pamela to our virtual stage. Please enjoy the conversation.
Hey y'all.
Howdy bunch.
Hi.
Hello.
We all
Hi
here?
everyone.
Hello. My video is not. Oh, there it goes. Okay.
Oh. Hi.
Hey, what?
All right. Welcome everybody. Thank you to all of our participants who are here today. Thank you so much to Bill, Pamela, Andrea, and Toshi. Thank you guys so much for being here. I'm really honored beyond belief to speak with you all today. This is just really incredible. And happy Pride.
Happy Pride.
Black Lives Matter. What?
Black Lives Matter. Happy Pride.
Black trans lives matter.
Yeah,
Black trans
right.
lives matter. Black trans lives matter.
Amen. I would also like to just quickly thank the New York Public Library for inviting me today. Just like on a quick side note, in 2013, I got invited to do a talk at the New York Public Library, and it was in correlation with a show that was up called Why We Fight. The panel was called The Personal and the Political, and it was about children talking about losing parents to AIDS. It was the first time I actually got a chance to like stand up there and talk about my experience. And I was so nervous, just as I'm so nervous right now. I can't tell you how nervous I am right now. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's Zoom. Maybe it's, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's you guys, because you're so beautiful. But yeah, I feel like super nervous right now. But I got to do this talk and I was so scared to invite anyone because I just wasn't really open about being HIV positive and about losing my mother to AIDS. And so when I invited a bunch of people to talk, it was like the day before. I did it on Facebook. I was like, hey, I'm doing this talk. You guys want to come through? I sent some like text messages, some emails. And I was like, hey, like, you want to come? And everybody came. And for the first time, I got to stand up there and talk about what it meant to me to be someone who was prenatally infected with HIV, which for those of you who are watching out there means that's mother to child transmission. So I've been living with HIV for 30 years now. I was really excited to be invited to this talk because I feel like I have kind of an interesting perspective because I was born in 1990 and I received a HIV diagnosis in 1993, which is like pre-1996. So I'm kind of like at the tail end of like some real serious chaos. So in a way, I feel super connected to you all. And for me to be here today as a long-term survivor, as a queer person, as a brown person, I'm just extremely elated to talk to you all tonight. The world's on fire. Like the world is on fire.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Right? The world is on fire and we made it. We made it here.
Yeah.
So let's get into this. So to be totally and completely honest, I hate like when I do a panel or when I'm sitting and I'm talking to somebody and they just kind of like go online and they like research and they do the Googling and they kind of like read a little bit and then they like ask questions based on what they read. So I would love for this conversation to be as kind of organic as possible, but I did go online. I did read some things. I did pull some stuff, okay? So I'm just gonna be 100 with you guys, okay? I've been thinking about so many things, especially within this moment of the coronavirus, COVID. It's been extremely triggering for me. And it's been so triggering that it's like, I'll get a text message from someone and they'll say like, oh, like I'm positive for it. And I'm like, whoa, like, I just never heard anyone else say something like that to me if it wasn't talking about HIV. And I've been noticing that it's been like kind of hard to deal with that. And also seeing how like it's almost become like this trendy thing for people to talk about, like, oh, like I'm positive for this thing, you know? And I don't know, I don't know, it triggers me. But so I was reading a New York Times article. I'm talking to you, Bill. And this is recent. And you were talking about how you do these check-ins with your company. And you were actually just talking about that right before we got on this call, which I think is really, really amazing. And while you were doing the check-ins, you were talking about this idea of living through a second plague. And you were talking about how many people who lived through the epidemic felt cheated. And so in my mind, I've been thinking so much about the fact that it seems like the response to coronavirus has been kind of really immediate, if you know what I'm saying. And in a way, it's made me feel like I've been cheated in a way. And it's made me feel like, okay, well, if people would have responded this way to AIDS, would my mother have contracted the virus? Would I have contracted the virus? So I guess one of my first questions for you, Bill, would be, what are your thoughts on that? Like, how do you feel about that? What does it mean to feel cheated? Do you feel cheated in the response at this moment? And how does living through a second plague resonate with your body? And how do you think that will resonate with the work that you create?
Oh, thank you very much, Kia. You know, I don't remember using the term cheated, but maybe it amounts to the same thing. I sometimes say to people who ask me, well, what does it feel like? What do you understand from the AIDS crisis? And I say, well, you know, AIDS was a guilty disease. And I don't know if you are fans of Susan Sontag, but AIDS is metaphor. She talks about through history, there are different diseases, for instance, tuberculosis in the 19th century. Tuberculosis, the wasting disease, was supposedly from those people, oftentimes beautiful young women who were living a fast life. And they got sick and they died famously slow and terrible lives. Great stuff for poetry and so on. AIDS, so in other words, TB was guilty, right? AIDS was also that, for the reasons that we know. Now, your mother's situation, I'm not quite sure I understand it, but I have some inkling of what it might have been like for her, how she came to be in that situation. But many of us was because we loved in the wrong way, or we were not disciplined. Something, we had it coming, in other words. So if you're talking about cheated, I maybe have the feeling that when people talk about COVID, do they think that we had it coming? I have had people say, you know, COVID is the universe telling us we consume too much. We don't respect the animal world well enough. We don't really understand the perils of globalization. So yes, it's inevitable. There's going to come something like COVID, but is it the same thing as guilty? And I think that's the closest thing I can say. I felt like we were, the persons of should we call them the HIV generation? We were saddled with this idea, well, it's your own fault. And that doesn't make me happy, but it does make me maybe a bit more compassionate. People are foolish, short-sighted, and we need what we need when we need it. Who saves us? That's what this crisis says to me. What does it mean to be saved, redeemed? And as people shout all the time, the cavalry is not coming. They're not coming. We are the cavalry. We got to save ourselves. How's that?
Work. That was over.
What they said at the end of Hotel Rwanda.
Oh, yes?
Yes. It was Don Cheadle's character.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. And everyone wanted the U.S. to come. And his character said, no one's coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. Yeah.
I know. How do you all feel? I mean, Kia, it's very touching. There was a time when I was around when before, and I'm speaking now, very limited, gay men we were free at last, free at last. We could go out and party all weekend. We could have as many hookups as we want. There was always a shot. GMHC in those days, you just, hey, I saw you the other night at the Baz, you know, a shot and it would be taken care of. And then there was no shot. And then things began to change. But I always resented that when people would say, describe me, Black, gay, HIV positive, you know, and at that time, even the gay press was doing it. I remember a guy writing for The Advocate or someplace like that who said, yeah, well, you know, he will always be considered gay, HIV positive. But you know what? That's not true. In other words, I've lived through that identity. I am not, I certainly am still HIV positive, but that's not what defines me. And looking how beautiful you are, I think you also are not defined by something that's going to kill you. It didn't kill you.
Facts. And you know, it's amazing that you bring that up, because I feel like the more and more that I've been creating work, because I do create a lot of work around HIV and kind of my own understandings of it as growing up with it, as being a baby, a child, a young adult, an adult, trying to navigate sex, my sexuality, all these different types of things. And so I do feel like whenever I am also described in the media, I hear the same things. Black, queer, HIV positive, I hear these same things.
Even now, HIV positive, even now?
Yes. And I think it's really because, I make so much work about it. And that's kind of how I came into the world's eye, I guess, because I had something to say. And I really needed to say it because I didn't see it anywhere. I didn't see any other children. I didn't see stories about kids or their parents. I just didn't see that. And it was hard for me to find. It was really, really hard. And even to this day, it's kind of hard to find. But it's funny because recently I've been having more and more people coming up to me and telling me like, oh yeah, like my mother died of AIDS, both of my parents died of AIDS. And I'm like, oh wow. And they may not be HIV positive, but to hear that is like really interesting. And to hear that so many children who have parents who died of AIDS carry that stigma as well. You know?
My father died of HIV and AIDS, and it has been a really challenging thing to discuss. You know, my father was incarcerated, so caught up in the prison industrial complex. You know, he was a lifelong intravenous drug user, so he certainly could have contracted the disease either before going to penitentiary and or in penitentiary. I mean, 15 years, we know that, you know, same-sex couples were having sex on slave ships coming over here. And, you know, when you're in captivity, you have to, you know, our sexuality doesn't end, our desires don't end, our need need for pleasure doesn't end. And so, you know, it could have been we know that AIDS definitely ravished many confined or imprisonment situations. So yeah, and it's really tough to talk about. My grandmother denied it. She would not hear it. She didn't want to hear it. And it's been always a challenge to kind of talk about.
Yeah.
But, you know, having lived through the same era, Bill, and as you were talking, I had so many just flashbacks of that time. And, you know, and I am not HIV positive. And I felt really, there's a guilt to this day that I feel for surviving without contracting this, because I was doing everything else everybody was doing. I was going to get the shots. And then all of a sudden, we're watching, Michael Jackson moon dancing, and the very next frame was, there's this gay disease that's sweeping across America, and literally, I kind of went back into the closet. Went back into the closet, got married, even though I knew in my heart and in my body and soul that I was trans, but I couldn't accept that reality at the time. And I had come out as bi and was living a gay lifestyle. So, it wasn't like I was just afraid to be open about my sexuality, but I was very much afraid to be open about my gender identity. And that was the big struggle. And so kind of went back underground, and maybe that's what helped me to survive. And right on the tail end of sort of most hideous parts of the HIV/AIDS crisis was the crack epidemic. Overlaid on top of, HIV and AIDS. So it was, Black people, we've always had a very rough road to hoe. We've been
I want to jump in.
Yeah, please.
Jump in.
And I want to go back to like this tale of being cheated, and I'm thinking about one when the drugs came, and I lost so many friends before the drugs, and that was a moment, if we have to use that word, of feeling cheated. If they just could have, and I say this in this book that I'm doing about the AIDS era, in terms of the late 80s, early 90s, Funeral Diva, and I say if those drugs could have gotten here just 1 second, one moment sooner and saved just one more, just one, right? So I'm thinking about that. And then in this book, I also wrote a piece called The Tale of Two Pandemics, right? So basically, and this is the work that I wrote in the last 3 months to address, these two plagues that I'm talking about. But one, I'm seeing articles where they'll say something like shocking inequities in the healthcare system. And I'm like, what are you talking about?
Did you read 1619? Did you listen to the things that Michelle was saying? Right.
I was like, Black people, women, queer people, trans people, we all know, about the inequities in the healthcare system. We all know that it doesn't work. So please, right? You know what I mean? But people are coming out and saying, we're finally aware of things not working.
Yeah.
Actually, and then the interesting thing to me is that, the United States response to COVID has been terribly inadequate, right? But when Black people, rose up and started burning shit down, right? Am I supposed to say shit? Right? All of a sudden they called in the cavalry, right? So I was like, oh my God, right? All you have to have is some angry Black people. I mean, things changed in 2 seconds flat, right? They were calling, they had legislation, they were arresting people, whatever. And so interestingly enough, I feel like they won't even respond to, on one hand, yeah, there's a response that maybe COVID, impacts heterosexual people. So there's a little bit more, care and less blame. But the bottom line is, I haven't seen this country react to anything until Black people rose up after the killings of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all these people. And all of a sudden, the government is I gotta do something. They called in the guard. They had a curfew in 24 hours flat. So I'm saying if we could respond to illness in this way, boy, we wouldn't have any of these problems. You know what I'm saying? But it was interesting, that the real response was to angry Black people.
That's facts. And you know what I did notice that was so interesting that like kind of freaked me out is that for like a couple months, everything that I saw on the news was coronavirus, and then it disappeared for 2 weeks. I didn't see one thing, not one thing, not one thing. Not even the on CNN they had like these little virus modules that were like behind and it had like all the
Yeah.
Andrew
Virus graphics, I think. Yeah.
Like intense, and then not one thing, because Black people was going crazy, and everything that you saw. I have a question for you, Pamela. I'm always thinking about women. I'm always thinking about the feminine, and when I think about you and I think about, that time period in the 80s and the 90s, I've seen you do your poems and speak a few times, and every time you do, it's just so amazing. It just completely penetrates me. And I would love to just know more about how you held space for yourself then as a Black lesbian. I was watching something you did at Stonewall last year, Stonewall 50, and you said, we're all the black women and the peers on the first season of Pose. We're all the Black lesbians on the peers on the first season of Pose. And I was laughing because I was in that scene in the first season of Pose, and we was asking the same questions. It was like me and another girl were asking the same questions. But I would just love to know a little bit more about how did you actually hold space to take care of yourself then? And how do you hold space to take care of yourself now? Because you also hold those stories, and you tell those stories and you hold those people and those lives so dear to you.
Well, I feel like, first of all, like documenting my peers, Black lesbians and gays in the late 80s, early 90s who died of cancer and AIDS, I feel has been my life's work. And that I've held space and I've written about that time when no one was. No one was. It wasn't popular. We weren't having these panels, anything, and I couldn't quite believe it because that was like my entire generation, at the beginning of Allen Ginsberg's Howl, he said, I saw the best minds of my generation destroyed. And that's like what happened for me, right? With HIV/AIDS and with cancer in terms of how it impacted women. And I feel like Black lesbians have completely been erased from the dialogue. Like, up until a couple of years ago, when we were in that show together and I curated you into that show, and I was really honored that Ishmael Houston Jones had asked me, because it was the first time that I, as a Black lesbian, that's the terminology I have, basically got to speak, and
wow.
Like what I had to say was important to a generation, because like when they ask people to talk about this generation, they ask white men. And that basically, in like women's experiences, lesbian experiences. So, in a way, I feel like I've held the line for so long. Like I remember being at Cape Coast Castle in Ghana, and I saw all the bodies of like, all the spirits of African slaves, who were, shipped there. And like, they're so nameless, that the bottom line is we got two stories in America. We got like, roots. And I don't know, I think maybe, well, I won't say, and then they tell our stories through science fiction, but I'm not going to go there. But really, like, the preeminent story was roots. And it's like there were hundreds of thousands of millions that came through those ports. So you're telling me we got one story of one family? You know what I mean? And so I feel that the same way. I said, I made two promises that I would document not only my ancestors, the slaves, that I would document all of my friends and all of my peers who passed away, who are not, historically included. And I've done this work, solo. I've held it, and now, everybody's like, oh, talk about it. And I have the book coming out, and I feel like it's such a blessing. Like Amy Shoulder saw, like, who actually has a documentary Disclosure on Netflix this week. So I'm gonna do a plug for her. But yeah, I feel like lesbians, and I was really scared to say that thing about Pose, you know, but I'm like, you know,
It's facts though. It's facts though.
Yeah, but they're also like, you know, calling like white lesbians and, you know, all this stuff to like consult, you know, and they're calling ACT UP, but they're not pulling from like, you know, queer Black people, you know, like we're not the consultants, or at least I haven't been called, and I have a lot of history. So I have some issues with that, you know, who gets included? Can we share space? You know, it's not about one or the other, but it's like, can we share? But Toshi, you're like part of my generation, so I don't know. Did you want to add something to that or say?
I mean, I feel like you really cover the ground. That I feel like that's all I was around was Black lesbians. Like it was not, you know, I didn't have the lens of, I like refused to have the lens of whiteness. Like it just wasn't applicable to my experience. And like coming out of being a child of civil rights activists that also, you know, from a very young age were active in the Southern Freedom Movement, the civil rights movement. And I think doing music and doing the kind of music I was doing, I do like really remember that like people thought I was a little bit weird because I did all kinds of music. I was a big rock and roll person, and that was just strange to be like, you know, a Black dyke, like playing rock music. And I often ended up, you know, played at CBGB's gallery and CBGB's. And I would be on these, like, if y'all remember CBGB's, you would be on a show with like 8 bands in one night. And it would be like, duh, duh, duh. And so kind of in the middle, like I would be like, hello, this is me. And I don't know. I feel like you really covered. There's a way that we had to know each other, know each other's names, know each other's experiences, and be able to live to talk about it. And I do think, Pamela, like you have really been a force in that regard. And I think I've musically tried to be a force in that regard. And, you know, I had a great, like, you know, I get moms wherever I can get them. And when I first started out, I dream of Nona Hendrix since I was a kid. And Nona Hendrix like kind of swooped in as my career was starting to like go. And she just like told me, you know, about the world. She was like, these people are not your friends. Like, and these people are like this and these people are like that. And it really helped me find my center and my grounding. And also helped me be collaborative with other people who maybe didn't know everything. But I don't know, Pamela, when you think we like all found each other and made like beautiful tribe and beautiful connection through such, you know, a really incredibly catastrophic time, but also a time of like immense growth and exploration. And it's like, oh, we're being given all of these crises and we have to fight with them and through them and navigate in ways almost like we just kept growing wings on our back. So yeah, I'm with you on pretty much everything everybody has said. I really just could be listening to everybody talk tonight, as it's really good for my soul. So I'm so grateful to be in this circle.
Just to add on to that, like, because you are the child of parents who are already doing activist work, civil rights work, how are you feeling in this current moment? Like, does it feel different? Does it feel the same? Because I feel like there's a lot of influence that we have now with social media and media. And for me, sometimes, like, not that I question people's intentions, but like, I wonder if there's like a definite difference between like, okay, we have to be outside, we have to be together, we have to be in numbers, we have to be bodies in numbers, and I'm gonna go because people are going. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's something that's been on my mind because sometimes I witness things that feel not 100% genuine. So I'm curious to know.
Yeah, well, look, like one thing, you know, I was a baby. My parents were so young. And one thing I do really say is like, they were so young. Like there's a way that young people understand the moment that is happening for everybody in just a visceral, like direct way. Yeah. And other people who are older is completely necessary because that one, they have kind of like brought us to a point, and then young people arrive, and when they arrive, they're like, we're here, and this is what like they are like this. And my mom told me, like, you know, make sure you replace yourself over and over again, you know, as you live your life. Like, make sure you replace yourself over and over again. Make sure, I said, I will be like a tree, and I will like allow people to take what they need and do other things with it. Make sure that you have somebody 10 years and increments of 10 years younger than you, like just annoying you with how they think you do your work. And I have like really, the older I get, like, I'm like, wow, they're really there pushing me around. And I understand it because of her movement work and the civil rights movement. And it's not like people were that old, but it was really important for there to be a student nonviolent coordinating committee of young people who were addressing things at a hotter level, a really specific level. And those people, my mom and my dad and the Freedom Singers, brought art into the movement. Like, they are the ones that got in the car and sang those songs and took them all over the country and raised money. As my mother got older, she did exactly what she said. She always had younger people, and she always had the sensibility that younger people would attack the same movements in different ways. And it was not, as you got older, your business to critique them, right? Like, you almost don't know what they're doing. And so now I like am sitting here, and the thing that resonates with me is how dangerous it still is. Like, how this country had the experience of a nonviolent movement and refuses to accept nonviolence as a mode of transportation for systemic change. This government of this country actually invests in violence more than it invests in anything else. It invests in destruction more than it invests in anything else. Even through every pandemic, it first needs to invest in destruction before it gets transformed by people's movements, by these, you know, the turning wheels we do into bending to our will. Like, and sometimes that takes like years and years. And going back to Bill and Pamela, we lose people while we are simultaneously trying to stay alive on that front, and then simultaneously trying to stay alive in the dangerous battle to get the change from our resources, the resources that belong to us, to activate in a state of healing. And that totally happened during Southern Freedom Civil Rights Movement. That totally happened in the 80s and the 90s. It is totally happening now. And inside of the spectrum of all of that, there is always somebody doing something you were just like, why are they doing that? And you always kind of want to be like that. But I'm always like, yo, turn your head. Like, turn your head. Like, that's not where the attention needs to be. Like, it's there. My parents told me they got their, you know, my father's gone. But my mom told me she got her file, you know, on like how they spied on her during the movement, and all of the redacted parts let them know who was telling. She knew. She's like, I know who was telling on us, who was cheating on us, who was lying on us. And she told me, and I don't know if it's this severe, but it made me be a certain kind of person. She's like, if you're in a room with two people, one of them is lying. And, you know,
that's cool.
That sensibility will get you through just about anything. Like, you know, just understand that all around you is the spectrum of possibility. And you can choose, right, which one you're going to pay attention to the most. Or you know, and that's up to you. Like, all of us make that decision. But right now, I'm pointed towards the light. And one thing that I think young movement, and it comes from all of our movements, have is this understanding of healing justice and inclusivity. That, you know, that some of our other movements were very afraid to be inclusive of our whole selves, because they're like playing that game. Like, let's see if we can just get this one in the door. And if we get this one in the door, like we gonna be okay. And it will come back around and get you gay people, come back around and get you, you know, like come back around and acknowledge, you know, come back around. And this movement is like, we're not coming back around. Like, we all gonna be out here. We're gonna be out here together. We're gonna walk through the door together. And not only that, but we got a sensibility that we need to take care of each other. and that it's not going to be okay for us to waste away in this dangerous place, that we have practitioners, we have medicine, we can elect people of consciousness into positions of power that serve their communities and that are interested. And even if we're not elected, we can take those positions because we know what to do. That is what's happening right now. And that is like kind of the best thing in this most like dangerous place again.
Ashe.
Ashe.
Wow. Andrea, you are actually like in one of these positions now. How does that feel? Like how much weight and responsibility do you feel like you're holding on your shoulders right now?
A tremendous amount. And that's probably an understatement. I mean, literally, I get emails from people saying, the world is watching you. I live 1.5 blocks from where George Floyd was murdered. So I represent the area, the community that the murder happened in. And if whenever you see any incidents of, from the knee on the neck to Reverend Sharpton speaking, or Attorney Benjamin Crump speak, like all of those events happened like 1.5 blocks from my home. And I spend a lot of time there, just, because we're on quarantine, like that's my walk. That was my walk before George Floyd got murdered. And so, now it's like a tourist, like literally white people are coming from all over the state, from out of state, to pay their respects, to mourn, to grieve, whatever. I mean, I do think there's a bit of disingenuousness that you pointed out earlier, Kia. People are protesting maybe because there is nothing else to do.
Also that part too.
I mean, I think that's a big part of it, Is it helping the movement? Yes. But, not all of it is, justice for Black people.
Mm-hmm.
But we take it. Just to answer your question really succinctly, it's a lot of weight. I mean, I'm dealing with, I'm one of the only transgender elected people in the country. So, I hear about issues in other parts of the country that impact trans people, and as well as, throughout the city, people that I don't necessarily, they're not my constituents per se, but they see me as a Black person, as a trans person, as a member of the LGBT community, then they see me as being able to help resolve some of those issues too. So it's much broader than just a typical politician who is only responsible for their constituents. I have this much broader base that I'm, that relies on my input and assistance and help and those kinds of things. But, I mean, I think being Black in America, being a trans woman in America has helped to prepare me to carry that kind of weight. Like, it's what we do. I happen to have been blessed to see the parable of the sower, as well as your piece, Bill, about time, the 60-second piece, the 60-minute piece.
Story time it was called.
Story time, yes. And both of those really magical performances, meditations, shifted me molecularly, right? Like got inside of my bones. And I think art helps to save us. Art helps us to recognize the bridges that we cross over to carry, because art is always a dialogue. You know, when you're writing your poems, Pamela, you know, you're speaking to, you know, Ginsberg and to Hughes and to, you know, Brooks or whoever. And when you're making performance art, Bill, I would imagine that, you know, it's a dialogue between what has come before us and what's ahead of us. And so, you know, those things kind of help me to be able to hold up that weight. I want to mention something about pose, just because, you know, and I know everything has its challenges and problematic, and, you know, not every production can do everything for everybody. However, I get so emotional in watching those episodes, because it is the most accurate description of the feelings that I was having in the 80s and 90s as a Black LGBT identified person, struggling with my gender identity, struggling with, you know, sexuality, and seeing those shows really captures that spirit. And I don't know if the young people who are portraying those characters realize that, but it is it just, it's like watching my life on television.
Well, I mean, I have to like address that. I mean, I do think that it's powerful and I think it's pioneering, but I have like a tremendous issue about the erasure of like Black lesbians. Like we have to create a basically inclusive, you know, history, herstory, whatever you want to call it. You know, I went to, what is it, like, you know, the Whitney, and I see the David Wojnarowicz, you know, stuff, and you know, and that's like on, you know, queer LGBTQI burial ground, okay? And I see this, you know, I see this person, and basically Audre Lorde was alive at the same time, you know, and I was like, wow, there could be a dialogue here, you know, but no, you know what I mean? And then I turn on the television and here's like supposed to be progress. And it's like, and no, we're not there. And we were there, you know, so it's inaccurate.
Absolutely.
Or if I know, you know, white lesbians who are like, you know, they called me to consult on pose. And I'm like, well, I was down, I worked on the piers, you know, I worked at Hetrick Martin when it was still down there. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of like, and no one's called me to tell that history. And so I feel like we can pioneer, and it is our job to see each other, because we're not being seen in a larger, you know, picture. So in that regard, and I mean, I'm afraid to challenge, because then on the other hand, it's like, it is progress and all of that. But then on the other hand, it's like, but we were there. Audre Lorde was there, you know, Jewel Gomez and Cheryl Clark. And these are people like, you know, it's how I form my voice, you know. And I mean, again, like, you know, I always write about, you know, ACT UP was downstairs, and then it was like, you know, Donald Woods and, you know, other countries and all the readings, we were upstairs, right? And then that history becomes so segregated, you know? So it's like, so, you know, the white history is like documented. And that's the other thing, like, you know, when we're talking about like direct action and stuff like that, like here were like all these queer people that were converging upon New York City. We came out of the churches, we came out of the small towns, you know, we were brought on by Audre Lorde and James Baldwin. And here we are in, you know, New York City, like, you know, making ourselves, and you can't get a record. You know what I mean? You cannot be Black and gay. You can't be all those things. And then, you know, go home and say, you know, Mom, you know, I just got arrested, because that stays on your record for, you know, ever, right? So in a way, our responses had to be different. And I feel that there's been a devaluation, because then, you know, when people talk about like, you know, ACT UP, or they talk about Queer Nation, or they talk about any of those things, they're like these important, you know, direct action responses, but a lot of people of color could not. I mean, and so, you know, we wrote, and so we performed, and so we sang, and so we danced, and so we had to approach it in an entirely different way. And I want somehow for that to be included. You know, I don't want that to be, and then I'm having like this issue too, like if you were like really messy, you know, everybody like celebrates you, you know, but it's like, what if about, you know, the people who went, and I'm not conservative at all, right? But I'm like, you know, well, what about the people who went to the jobs, you know what I mean? And just tried to like hold it down, and like hired like the first, you know, trans person to ever hold the job, or hired like the first Black lesbian to ever hold the job. So like, what about that? And like, I'm worried about a movement that like celebrates just kind of like, I don't know, hanging out, you know, doing different stuff. I don't want to go there, but I'm just saying, like, there are so many different ways, you know, and how do we value all of those ways? You know,
you get no pushback from me.
Yeah, not, you know, elevate like one over the other, you know, because we've all been fighting in so many different ways. And I worry that people of color, Black people, Latinx people, Native American people have been like so left out of the dialogue, Asian people, you know, because we've had to organize and we've had to fight, even though all that stuff comes from us. Okay, let's be clear. You know what I mean? Black people, without Black people, there would be no movements. Okay, period. But the bottom line is that how do we value activism? How do we qualify it? You know, and who, you know, who is recognized, who is not recognized? What's the best way? You know. Yeah, so that's something that like presses on me, you know, because I know a lot of people who were in the direct action groups, and you know, I admire them, but I also think like people of color, we had to do it really differently, you know, a lot of us, and I want that to be part of the history too.
Yeah. Yes. And I think you're really bringing that into this history. I can't wait to read your book.
Thank you. Thank you. Funeral Diva, City Lights, plenty.
I'm so excited. So I think we're getting towards the end of our conversation part, but I think one of my last questions would be, how is everyone taking care of themselves in this moment? What are you doing for yourselves to take care of yourself? What are you doing, Pamela?
You know, I'm doing something. I'm painting a lot. I don't know. I've been like really taken with visual arts. I mean, I think I was always a maker, but more and more in like the last 5 years, I've kind of been like owning that and claiming it. And so I'm like doing collage and painting, and I could do that like all day long. And then also I taught a class the other day. I volunteered to teach something, and all my former students from SAIC showed up, and basically, and a lot of like kids of color, a lot of like white kids, and they're not kids, they're adults, but it was really good to see their faces, you know, and it was like, I was like, wow, because at first I was mad because I wasn't getting any money, you know what I mean? Then I was like, I saw all those students and I was like, oh my God. And like one of the brothers had on a dashiki and he was sitting there and he just smiled at me. And one of the Black girls from Atlanta, she talked a lot, you know, and it was healing for me to be in dialogue with them. So I think, you know, I think we're all inventing different ways, or at least I've been inventing different ways of coming together with people. And that's been beautiful, volunteering when I can, you know, yeah, just, I don't know. So, but definitely art, you know, art is what keeps me alive, you know, keeps me speaking, keeps me healthy, drives me, you know.
Well, I'm very fortunate that I am married to a wonderful, caring, calm man who is a great cook. And that goes a long way, long way. I'm looking out right now on the garden that Arnie Zane and I envisioned when we moved into this place in 1980, and he died here in 88. But every time I look out in the garden and I think about a dream fulfilled, and I'm crazy, like many artists are. I'm always worrying about my obituary or what's going to happen. But I really I binge watch Asian historical dramas. I love the Qing court. I love the Korean. I love all of that. I must admit, I spend a lot of time with this very iPad. I'm absorbed in it, and we read out loud to each other. We're reading Don Quixote out loud right now to each other. So there's a really healthy intellectual climate in the house. And I want to ask that about the group, about the Black family, because I think we all have stories. Toshi has a very good story, but I mean, I don't know how do you feel about that? But I know when I was speaking to some young people who were in our space with Rashad Newsom, and why it's still taboo in a lot of the houses to talk about being HIV positive. And I was shocked. I mean, these young people are still, there's still a stigma. There's a stigma because they've been told by their parents and the churches that you are going to get sick and you are going to die because you deserve it. I mean, so I'm trying to rebuild my family, my big, sprawling African-American family, extremely homophobic. But I'm trying to lead with my heart as a way of healing myself. So that's how I'm doing it.
Yeah, activating and creating, and definitely operating in a self-care mode, and also just reaching out to my family is big and gigantic, and reaching out to people, supporting organizations when I can. And I kind of can't believe how much like I'm working. I really thought like it would just be this huge, like people would kind of give a rest. And nobody is stopping. And I really had to make like my own days of like, you know what, guess what? I'm not doing anything today. I'm not being on a Zoom today. And I guess activating towards the future, and staying in a lot. Like I actually don't buy the opening up anything. And I say me and my family made agreements about our behavior. We made agreements about the behavior we thought would take care of us and sustain our safety, and we have stuck to it. And we think the opening up is bananas, and we don't understand it at all. And I say I don't understand it, but I completely understand it, because that's the behavior of our country, the value, the made up economic structure that has been created that's completely out of control, and it does not sustain most of the people in this country or the planet. So we literally activating for billionaires who refuse to divest their wealth. Talk about defund the police, defund the billionaires and give us back our money. So I'm like, just because they tell you to go somewhere does not mean you have to go. and if you decide to go, you can, some part of your heart say, I'm not supposed to go the way I used to, so that you can take care of yourself. So we are very much trying to hold a position, because I don't see the difference between where we were when they told us to stay in and where we are now. Like literally nothing has changed. Like the virus hasn't changed. Like the only thing that's changed is the really whack, really whack behavior of our government has gotten even more whack. And they're like, we can steal an election, and we can steal this, and we can steal that. Y'all go out, y'all go out, y'all go out. We can take. We can use this moment of tremendous chaos to our advantage and plant judges and things like that. So I've been staying in a lot, and I've been trying to keep my eyes, as they used to say, on the prize, and activate on the lane that I want to be activated. I'm not buying all of this open. I even hate when they say open up, because we all know what opening means. Each of us understands what opening means, and the beauty of opening, and the beauty and transformative space of opening, the mystic space of opening. And we know what they're doing is actually a way of like closing and annihilating culture and people. So staying inside a lot, maybe drive around in a car, go to the beach early in the morning before anybody gets there, fly my kite, and wait, just wait until it's all right.
You know, I actually make collage art as well, visual art.
Collage, I love
There's
it.
a piece right behind me that I literally made the morning of when George Floyd was murdered. And like you, Toshi, I thought I was gonna be able to catch up on all my projects and all my dreams and visions, but you know, and you guys know my job. I mean, like literally, I am on Zoom from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. like every day. But I've written 7 poems in the last 35 days, which is kind of a record for me. Like even when I was in graduate school, I didn't write 7 poems in a month. Like
I did 30-30 during April. Poet day. That's a challenge. Do that. Do that.
I may try that one of these days. But you know, so something about this time is driving me to create and make art, even within the context of, you know, trying to respond to the coronavirus and the uprisings and the deep pain that my community is in. I think turning to art has been able to help me make some sense of that. You know, I fast every year during the solstice, so I'm 3 days into a 4-day fast right now, summer solstice. So that, you know, and I've been doing this for probably 30 plus years, and it really helps me to stay in touch with my own body and my own spirituality, and so I'm glad I was able to. I was worried about this season, just because of everything that's going on and the stress levels. Would I be able to do it? But I've been like sailing through it, man.
Wow.
Without much. Maybe it's the fact that I got so much work that I don't have time to think about being hungry. But when you talked about your partner, Bill, you did kind of make me a little hungry. Food does exist in the world, so
it does, and it's good.
Yeah, but yeah, that's been my thing. I usually do the acupuncture and the massage and all of that stuff, but we can't do that right now. I mean,
No.
I can't anyway. Like you said, Toshi, I ain't going nowhere for about a year.
That's right.
Yeah.
I don't care what the governor says. In fact, it's really infuriating because once they determine that the disease is mostly impacting Black people and elderly people, then all of a sudden it became this thing to open up. And literally nothing has changed. In fact, the virus has become even more intrusive, as it were. And so it's basically saying, you know, these are the populations that we don't care about. Very similar to the HIV and AIDS epidemic, right? Like gay people, Black people, Africans, like, oh well.
Right. Are y'all ready for a couple questions?
More questions. This is the question and answer section.
Let's see. We have one question here. This is relating to your art practices. So how have your art practices changed during the pandemic? And what art have you turned to in recent months? I think that's kind of what we just established, but how have things shifted? Have things shifted like in any kind of way?
I don't know, Toshi, how you feel, Toshi, but I know your ensemble, but I found it has made we had to get very serious about discipline. My associate, Janet Wong, She wisely said, okay, we were able to keep everybody on salary, but people were given assignments. And these are young people just coming to the company, and they've had to learn things that were being made when some of them were being born, and they had to learn it from a monitor in amazingly small situations. My Chinese dancer, Wei Wong, has a 1-year-old baby, and his mother was here from China and they're all three of them are living in a couple of rooms, and he is doing his work. They all were, that has made, I threw a temper tantrum because I said, we're space people, we need space. But you know, guess what? You ain't got it. So what are you gonna do? Digital technology, as much as I resent it, has really helped us stay in touch with our practice. But we can't wait to be back in touch. We hope in September, back in the same space together.
Yay. Anything else? Okay, I'll go to another question. This is for Toshi. Do you have any new insights about your adaptation of Parable of the Sour now in the wake of the pandemic, police violence, and growing protests?
Oh my God. Yeah, I don't know if I have new ones, but I have confirmed ones. And, you know, Adrienne Marie Brown and I are doing a podcast, which we just went on live yesterday. And we are, and we started before this happened. So we're going through every single chapter in Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talents, and the unfinished novel, Parable of the Trickster. And every week and we really wanted to go up to and through the election. One of the things that I really have felt is doing this work, people always come up to me and they say, it's happening now, we're in it, we're in Parable. You're like kind of panicky, you know, oh my God, like, you know, and I'm always like, yo, did you get into a car with a stranger? Did you order food and have it delivered to your door? Like, are you like walking around down the street with buds in your ear and not hearing anything else? Like, you're not exactly in Robledo 2024 in the devastation. There are people on the planet that exist in that world, but what it really confirms is that now is the time. Like, now is exactly the time to make your decisions to bend towards Octavia's calendar or been away from the conditions of Octavia's calendar. Like right now, like you have to kind of do a level of work and thinking, you know, not the panic that makes you like run around and not be able to think, but the soul resonating that makes you very specific and makes you able to put out something, do something. Thinking about the election, like don't spend so much time on the election. Your choices are really simple. You have to get this person out of office, and then you have to sustain the people around the country. As Andrea said, like, you know, she's not just operating from where she was elected from, so she's operating all over the country and probably the world. She has to stay in office and be supported at every step of her way. Those 5 women congressmen, they have to be supported. It doesn't matter if they are from your town. So that is like, that's easy work, right? Hard, like don't be talking about that on Facebook like every day. Just know you're gonna vote, know you're gonna get this person out of office, know you're gonna step on people and make sure it gets done. And Parable, when it does happen, you don't have the luxury for that. You have to be in such a state of survival mode. You don't have time to think. You don't have time to do anything. You are using your resources to get through like every second. And what I love to tell people is like, look at your currency and accept every kind of energy as currency and activate on that currency away from that future as hard and as strong as you can right now. Your descendants will appreciate and thank you for all time.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Here's one for Andrea. Advice for effectively reaching out to politicians.
I just wrote my response in the chat. Email the shit out of them, because I'm telling you, it works.
Email, you say.
email them to death,
Mm.
and you will get a response. Yeah, I don't know about the Republicans because they don't care about nothing, but the real politicians, when they get a threshold of, they're like, oh, I gotta respond. I have to, you know, because 8 people think this is an issue, or 80 people, or 800 people, or 8,000 people, which is the level of emails that I'm getting right now. It's like 8,000 emails of people saying the exact same thing. You know, defund
Andrea, what are your feelings about the
don't
electoral?
defund the police.
Andrea, what can we do about the electoral college? What is your feeling about that?
I think the electoral college is an assault against democracy. It is not in any way, it has never been fair. I mean, it was started with the whole premise that, oh, these people don't know what they're doing, so we're gonna create a process for them. I think we should have one vote, one person, and we got to change the Constitution, which means we got to elect people that are on that path, that want to make that change. That's how we get.
And what are you saying to young people, like some of my young relatives, that say, yeah, I know y'all marched in the 60s and all but you know, they're still shooting us down. I'm not going to vote.
You know, then you can't, you have nothing to really add. I mean, the protest, this is my model for social change. We must have people laying down on the freeway or marching in the streets or toppling statues of Robert E. Lee, because that's the only way to get people's attention. But we also, that's one leg of the stool. The other leg of the stool is people need services, right? People need food or housing or clothing or job training or, you know, education. We need to be able to help people in that. But once we get their attention, then we got to have somebody in office that can propose policy shifts. So if you're just marching without voting, it really amounts to nothing, because the only changes are going to come from people being able to be in the belly of the beast, advocating. And it is a really challenging place to be. Being a elected official in America right now today is the hardest job anyone can ever imagine. You know, and it was really difficult with coronavirus, and now you layer on top, you know, the awakening of Black rage, and it's very, very necessary and timely, but it creates a huge challenge to govern in this environment. But I say to those young people, please vote.
Yeah, that's what I say. Please vote.
You just have to. I mean, it's the way that change happens in this society. And I know they try to make it hard for us to vote. You know, I think in Kentucky they got like one polling place for the whole state. But it wouldn't be funny if it was, you know, I mean, it's so sad. But we gotta make it happen. We have to.
On that note, this is gonna conclude our conversation today. How's everyone feeling?
You're wonderful, Kia. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
I have been lifted up.
I have really, really, really enjoyed everything that everyone said. I take it to heart. This has been an amazing hour. I wish I could talk to you all forever. And hopefully I get to. Hopefully we can see
Yeah.
you in person and we can, continue talking. But I just like to thank everyone for their time. Thank you to the New York Public Library, and thank you to everyone that came check out this talk today. Ashe.
Ashe.
Bye,
Ashe.
everyone.
Bye,
I love
gorgeous
you all.
panelists.
I
It was
really
good to
do,
see
honestly.
everybody. All right, keep up the good fight.
Yes.
Boom.